U.S. tariffs on more than 30 countries are set to come into force on Wednesday. That's tomorrow. Analysts are warning of an all-out trade war and risk of recessions as global markets plunge. Nigeria's Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment says the government is focused on building economic resilience and accelerating export diversification in the wake of the tariffs.
Africa is kind of insulated from global trade because we're just less than 5%, like about 3% of global trade. So the players that really dominate, we don't want that retaliation and then we end up being collateral damage or the unintended consequences. So that's really what the issue is and why it's making headline news. So the good thing is that we're responding, we're not reacting. This has been a priority area since I came into office, operationalizing the AfCFTA. You know that Mr. President has been commended as digital trade champion. We've been pushing our export agenda. We hosted the Secretary General on the 16th of January. We were in Addis. At Davos, I was very bullish about this agenda. So we have had a plan under the 8-point agenda. Item 7, which is where this industry comes to play, speaks to accelerating diversification. So this is an area that we've been looking at for a long time, because this is what's going to help MSMEs. MSMEs are nearly 50% of Nigeria's GDP. And so we've looked at that demographic and we identified the AfCFTA because it speaks to women-led businesses, youth-led businesses. It speaks to informal sector, formalizing it. It speaks to MSMEs and how they can attract foreign exchange by exporting across the continent.
Well, let's cross live to our Lagos studios and speak to prominent economist Bismarck Rewane. Thank you very much for joining us on Newsnight. Good to see you. Well, it does seem that Nigeria is speaking from both sides of the mouth. On the one hand, we hear from Wale Edun, the finance minister, that look, 14% tariff have little effect on Nigeria's exports. But then again, Oduwole, the Minister for Trade Industry, says, look, Trump's tariffs will negatively impact Nigeria's exports. What do you make of this?
Firstly, let us understand what has happened. What has happened is that the United States has imposed tariffs across the world to different countries. And the largest victim of this move is actually China. Between China and the United States, the United States imports $440 billion worth of goods from China and exports only about 140. So there's a major trade imbalance. But the tariff war is one thing. The fear that because of the tariff war, there will be a recession, and a global recession brings down price of commodities. That is where it affects Nigeria. For example, the price of oil, Brent crude, which is our major export, was as high as $77, $76 a barrel until about a week ago, and today it's trading at $60. It has lost over 25% of its price in the last 3-4 days. That is significant. And crude oil is responsible for at least 70% of our export earnings. The price of cocoa has come down from, it was $12,000 much earlier in the year. It's now down to about $7,800. The LNG gas has also dropped sharply. On the other hand, we've had our import bill actually come down. But relative to other things, Nigeria is actually integrated with the rest of the global economy. So there's no question of the fact that Nigeria will be affected. But what I think I hear the minister saying is that the impact on us will be relatively less than other emerging markets or other developing economies. But to say that we're not going to be affected is not accurate. The point is that we're going to be affected and maybe not as much as the more vulnerable countries.
Well, that's good to note. But what do you make of Nigeria's choice? There seems to be this, choice not to retaliate, but just come up with a strategy to prevent further tariffs from the U.S. Is this a good strategy? What should be, positioning now?
Retaliate with what? Basically,
maybe with counter tariffs, like we're getting from China. China is doubling down we're going all the way.
We are not as relevant as China in the global scheme of things. The reality is that our share of global trade is less than 2% of global exports. So there's no question of us being able to retaliate. All you can do is to build resilience so that in the next time around when things happen, you are not as impacted as you are impacted now. You remember in 2008, when the global economy went into a downturn, Nigeria was severely impacted. But today we are not as vulnerable as we used to be. But that does not mean that we are totally invulnerable. I don't think that is the situation. So first and foremost, we don't have the capacity to retaliate. We have no muscle, and quite frankly, we are too small. We can be written off and shut down in no time. So let's face our reality. Let's build our resilience so that our economy becomes strong. You can become a giant of Africa, and a giant as time goes on. And we move away from being a potential great exporter to being an actual great exporter.
So where do we begin from in building resilience? How do we make our exports, globally accepted? Because that seems to be a major challenge where Nigeria continues to export to a very large extent primary goods, not finished goods. Where do we begin this resilience from?
No, but basically, what you have to do is that you cannot be competitive if your power supply is erratic. You cannot be competitive if you are having, you're having insecurity. You cannot be competitive if your infrastructure is weak. So I think we have to put the building blocks in place very quickly to start being competitive. So our cost of production, right, relative to others and our neighbors, will be efficient and very competitive. So I think that's the first thing. Let us not. We are aspirational in terms of we want to be a $1 trillion economy, but it's going to take time. And we have to realize that, first and foremost, we reform our economy. Secondly, we build the infrastructure, which includes power, concessioning of our major infrastructure with the public-private partnership. And then we begin to tell the truth to ourselves to say, this is what we need to do in terms of bringing prices down and ensuring that growth is based on a structural shift that puts us in a position to be competitive. That's what I hear government policymakers saying, but also we now have to walk the talk and not just talk the talk.
And Nigeria's exports hover around $5 to $6 billion to the United States annually. Where are the opportunities really for Nigeria? Where are the low-hanging fruits?
Well, I think first and foremost, you have crude oil. You don't have to export to the United States. You can export to other countries. So you have your crude oil, you have your natural gas, you have your soya bean, you have your cashew, you have cocoa, and some other things that are there, including palm oil if you can. So if you concentrate on those things where you have a comparative advantage, which I think Nigeria has in certain commodities, then you can begin to build around that. But I think the first thing is that the structural adjustment that is required for the economy is one thing, but the mental adjustment to actually agree and believe that we have some weaknesses. Let us accept it and stop deceiving ourselves that we are great in terms of economic output. We have work to do. The longest journey in the world starts with the first step. We will do that, but we have to now begin to block the leakages, make sure that the monies that are coming in are efficiently deployed, and then we begin to account for it so that there's value for money in the process of re-engineering this economy. But definitely, there's some work that has been done, but there's a lot much more work to be done. And when it is done, you will feel the impact. So I don't think it's how to play in the international market that matters. It's how to be more productive domestically, employ people, reduce insecurity, bridge the infrastructure gap, borrow efficiently when you can, and ensure that the people feel the impact so that the economics is about making the people, improving the people's welfare. And if their welfare is taken care of, they will produce more. The more they produce, the higher their income per capita, and the more competitive Nigeria will become.
No doubt. But how do you protect the small and medium enterprises, the SMEs that have actually built, their business models around AGOA, AGOA exemptions, that the Africa Growth and Opportunities Act, in the light of this tariffs?
I don't think that's a good. No, the reality is that the small and medium-scale enterprises in Nigeria, first of all, are not exporting. What they are doing is supplying to the major multinationals and conglomerates that use their goods. Those companies need good roads from their plants to the markets. Those companies need consistent power supply. Those companies need water. And more than anything, they need manpower, skilled manpower. And if anything, they need finance. So if you address those things, Nigerian producers, both at the small and medium-scale enterprise, both at the commercial, and finally at the conglomerate and multinational level, will be competitive. Right now, we are not competitive. In 2023 and 2024, most of our companies reported huge forex losses because they were not in a position, they had to deal with exchange rate volatility that has never been witnessed. Now we are seeing some stability. Now we are hoping that we would see some improvement in the power supply. If this happens, then our productivity as a country will begin to increase. Right now, we are just moving closely to where we will have positive labor productivity and positive total factor productivity. But until then, I don't want us to get carried away. I don't want us to get excited before the real harvest of our efforts begin to materialize. But definitely, we are now beginning to say the right things. We are beginning to do some of the good things slowly, and then the results begin to materialize as time goes on. But right now, let's not get carried away.
All right, it's interesting you say that, because I was actually going to take you up on that. When the government says, look, some of the reforms we've put in place are beginning to show, good signs of a recovery and strength for the Nigerian economy, but we'll have to leave it there. Bismarck Rewane is an economist. Thank you very much for joining us on Newsnight.